Take your Bibles and turn to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 20. I want to thank those who have invited me to be part of the chapel today, administration and the chapel committee, Aaron, and all of those that gave me this opportunity. And I really I've never even looked at what this pulpit was going to be like before, but there's a giant clock back there, and there's a little clock right here. So I guess we understand what the priorities are. Matthew chapter 20, I want to read the text for us. It's Matthew chapter 20, beginning actually at verse 17, and then we'll go down to verse 28. As Jesus was about to go up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside by themselves, and on the way he said to them, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death. And they will hand him over to the Gentiles to mock and scourge and crucify him, and on the third day he will be raised up." Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to Jesus with her sons, bowing down and making request of him. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" She said to him, "Command that in your kingdom these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right and one on your left." But Jesus answered, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink?" They said to him, "We are able." He said to them, "My cup you shall drink. But to sit on my right and on my left, that is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." After hearing this, the 10 became indignant with the two brothers. But Jesus called them to himself and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. It is not this way among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave. For just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." The burden of ambition is the strain of seeking approval. It is the taxing effort to earn the envy of others, many of whom are in competition with us. It is the weight of self-imposed anxiety over the recognition we believe is due us. The burden of ambition is the back-breaking labor required to maintain our place on the record board and defend it against all comers. It is the grief we feel when someone else matches or surpasses our achievement. Now, ambition can be a good thing. Motivation, determination, aspiration, get up and go, whatever you want to call it. But it has its negative counterpart: pride, self-importance, vanity, egotism. Not to mention how ambition often shifts from serving others to using others, from leading to dominating. There's a proper ambition and there's an excessive ambition. There's often a fine line between the two. Unfortunately, we've seen lately several celebrity pastors fall due to excessive ambition. What do I mean by celebrity pastors? Well, someone once defined celebrity as someone who is famous for being famous. Kardashians. I had to ask my wife, who's famous for being famous these days? Because I don't know. My notes say Paris Hilton, but I don't know if you remember who that was. In fact, it goes back and forth. Zsa Zsa Gabor. No one remembers that. Anyway, famous for being famous. As opposed to celebrated persons are celebrated. They're famous for having accomplished something. Celebrity pastors are those who are famous because, but celebrated pastors are those who have accomplished something. The phenomenon of celebrity pastors, I think, originated with the capacity of Big Eva, if you've read much of Carl Trueman's stuff, to create celebrities, and the skills of church marketers to sell entertainment instead of worship. Here's an early application of my message, if you will. A person with proper ambition works hard and waits for the recognition to come to them, the status and rewards that come from hard work. Whereas those with excessive ambition want recognition, and they want it now. And a good example of the latter type can be seen in Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus talks about those who have their rewards after they've done their works in front of others. Too many pastors today expect honor and recognition to be granted to them simply because of a status conferred upon them or rewards given to them for which the people that they're serving have no qualifications to give. I'm thinking of millennials. Any millennials here? We have something of that nature here in this incident in Matthew chapter 20, a rather blatant example of excessive ambition. This is a bid by two of the disciples for prominence and preeminence among the 12. Now, it's important not to miss the context, which is why I went back and read the previous verses. Jesus has just made this sobering and somber prediction of his coming passion. And what will be the reaction of his disciples to this? What will be their response? Well, apparently, they didn't understand it. Because apparently it didn't put them off the acknowledgement that he was the Messiah. Apparently, they still expected that they would one day be in the kingdom. Apparently, he had just mentioned the fact that there's going to be 12 thrones. Apparently, they're still counting on that. Apparently, they're still thinking of all of the blessings of the kingdom that the king is going to bring in. But obviously, as this next incident somewhat disappointingly indicates, they didn't really understand it. That's throughout the Gospels. Basically, this is the point, is that he comes, he is the Messiah. Everything he does is to demonstrate the fact that he is the Messiah, but everything he's doing is contrary to the expectation, so they're not getting it. The crowds certainly don't get it. The Pharisees don't get it. And frankly, disappointingly, even the disciples don't get it. They don't get it until after his resurrection. They display what one calls a mind-bogglingly cluelessness, a stunningly self-absorbed, astonishingly presumptuous frame of mind. I love those. Mind-bogglingly clueless, stunningly self-absorbed, astonishingly presumptuous. I could say something really unkind here right now, but I won't, okay? I'll move on. Jesus has just made a prediction of his passion, and this is designed, of course, to prepare them for the fact that he's leaving. But as a number of commentators point out, as James Montgomery Boyce points out, it was to prepare them for the kind of life they were going to be called upon. So the disciples might learn that self-denial, humility, and service are to be the pattern, not merely of his life and ministry, but theirs. His path to glory through humility, through suffering, was to be their path as well. And his life was a life of humility, but it's more than that. His life was a life of humiliation. Read Psalm 22. The fact is that we need to live and serve in humility, but we need to expect humiliation. A lot of excessive ambition, and the flip side of that is a lot of disappointment in ministry comes from the expectations that we bring. The expectation of being acknowledged and lauded and thanked and praised. Understand that the expectation of a life of following Christ is a life of humiliation and humility and service. They are to follow him. This goes clear back to when he called the disciples. The number one requirement for being a disciple is follow Jesus. That's it. Follow him. When he called them, he said, follow me. That's what being a disciple is. James Montgomery Boyce, again, has a small little book on discipleship, and he's got a couple of chapters on unpacking what it means to follow. To follow is not just to follow in the train of his blessings and follow in the train of his acknowledgement and take a little bit of that acknowledgement and honor to yourself. To follow him means, get this, you're going to get what he got. When I was a young Christian, my mother-in-law said some good advice. She gave me a lot of other advice, but she gave me some good advice. She said, never pray to be like Jesus unless you mean it. Because if you pray to be like Jesus, you just might get what Jesus got so that you can be like Jesus. Plenty of opportunities to demonstrate humility. Plenty of experiences of humiliation. It's pretty obvious if you're not experiencing humiliation, you're not really following Christ. In our culture today, that becomes even more so, but it might not even be that you have to go outside the context of the church in order to see that. Don't be surprised by that. Be ready for that. So here he's getting them ready by this. Again, he'd already done this back in Matthew chapter 16. Flip back there. I'm not sure how much time I've got, but Matthew chapter 16, because this is the same lesson I want you to see that they've already gotten. Back in Matthew chapter 16, he begins, verse 21. I'll just skim these. He began to show his disciples he must go to Jerusalem, suffer. There it is again. Here's where Peter took it upon himself to rebuke Jesus. Jesus rebukes Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan." It's right after, again, he says, I'm going to go down to Jerusalem, going to be suffering, going to be killed, going to be raised the third day. Verse 24, Matthew 16, he says, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Right after he tells them, this is what's going to happen to me, you need to understand, if you follow me, this is what's going to happen to you. So back to our text in Matthew chapter 20. What do we see right after this prediction of his passion? A lesson on excessive ambition. I've always been semi-amused as I've read this particular passage that the two sons of Mama Zebedee get Mama to go ask Jesus for that position. I mean, did you ever think about that? So here's some real men's men, okay? Let's get Mama to go ask and see if we can't get a higher place in the kingdom. Why she was there, we're not told, but probably she was part of the entourage that was going down to Jerusalem. And there's this kind of other sort of subtle message throughout this as well, because even though they're not getting it, they're still according Jesus a great deal of respect. Notice, let's pick it up there in verse 20. The mother of the sons of Zebedee came to Jesus with her sons, bowing down and making request of him. She comes with great respect. She's bowing down. Again, I have to ask, why is she doing the asking here? Well, it's pretty clear that they put her up to it. And in fact, in Mark's version, in Mark 10, verses 35 through 45, it just says they were the ones who made the request. So, and later on, Jesus is going to be addressing them. She comes with confidence that he's going to be the Messiah when you establish your kingdom. So they're still looking for that. In fact, in Luke 19:11, it says, about this time, the little band were expecting the kingdom to be set up, looking for things to be set up. They're probably expecting it to happen fairly soon, which is why they feel like they got to get in on the ground floor here. You got to get in. You got to make sure you get your request for prominence and preeminence real quickly. Jesus had just, as I said before, mentioned the 12 thrones, so they're still looking for that, but seating arrangements hadn't been listed, so I guess they're putting in for their position. The positions, of course, one on your right and one on your left are positions of honor, but don't miss this. They're also positions of power. Don't forget, the sons of Zebedee, James and John, that's who we're talking about here, are the sons of thunder. These guys are looking forward to the power that they're going to be able to exhibit. She's essentially asking Jesus to consider them his favorites. Now the idea of favorites is in sort of European kingship and even the medieval times and later, they would have people who are called favorites. Historians don't know what to do with these guys because they don't have an official office. A favorite is just the guy that was an advisor to the king or queen or whoever, who had power and honor without having the office. So Mrs. Zebedee comes along and wants Jesus to make her sons, these two sons of mine, the two most important and powerful men in the kingdom. She wants, or I should say they want, honor and prestige and power and honor and authority and power and preeminence and prominence and power and honor. What were they after? Power and honor. True humility squelches excessive ambition and fosters sincere ambition. And how do you know when you've got it? When the motivation is to work harder with less recognition. These guys want the opposite of that. They don't want to work for it at all. They want to be appointed. They want to have a position right there. And what drives it, of course, is pride. And, of course, that kind of excessive ambition goes right back to Satan. I don't know what you think about Isaiah chapter 14 or Ezekiel chapter 28, but I do think those two chapters are talking about Satan, and that's his problem. He wants power, and Satan only had one level to go. I mean, when you get that high, advancement doesn't seem to be that far open to you, and so you have to have the same kind of exaggerated self-estimate, exaggerated sense of self-importance, exaggerated self-serving. What I'm getting at, men, is that excessive ambition stems from something deeper in your heart than simply wanting to get ahead. It comes from a poor self-estimate because you've got too high a self-estimate. You haven't estimated yourself correctly, so you think you ought to be up there. Can't tell you how many shepherds conferences that I've been to, and I've always been blessed. I'm sitting there, and usually when I'm listening in a shepherds conference, it's dawning on me pretty strongly. That's why they're there, and I'm down here. It's pretty good. But you would be amazed. Something when shepherds conference comes around sometimes, and you would be amazed. Just sort of query some of the attendees and say, how did you like that last? Well, what did you think? And then just sort of see if you can't. Well, could you have done better? Boom, be ready, because yes, they could. Every single guy in Shepherd's Conference thinks he ought to be at that podium down there. Do not think more highly of yourself than you ought to think, but think soberly to have sound judgment. Well, we've got a quintessential negative example right here. How's Jesus going to respond to this? This is, again, an indication I may be letting out too much about myself here. I often do while I'm preaching. But, at this point, if right after this announcement, the Passion Week is coming, the cross is coming, right after that comes, hey, by the way, Jesus, when you do come into your kingdom, can we have numbers 1 and 2? I mean, I know it's not in the text, but Jesus was doing this a lot. Jesus did this a lot. He's dealing with the disciples. It's like, it was me. I would have gone, look, I need more time. I got, we're not getting there, okay? I know it's coming up quick, and, let this cup pass from me, but we'll get around. Please, this is not happening. Or, again, too much about me. What were you thinking? Did you just hear me? What are you talking about? Just cross, death, tomb. Are you listening to me at all? What are you guys? Jesus was so patient here. That's Jesus. That's how he handles it. So patient. You want me to do what? Verse 21, he said to her, what do you wish? Well, look at, he says, you do not know what you're asking. He said, verse 22, you don't know what you're asking. She asks for these her sons to be elevated to numbers 1 and 2. You don't know what you're asking. Very patient. It was kind of a mild rebuke, however. And notice what he says here. It's the gentlest way of sort of letting them down, right? Follow this? He says, by the way, at verse 22, he turns to them rather than her, so you can tell, because he's talking here. He says, what? He says, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink? Now, the cup that he's about to drink, of course, we know is the cup of suffering. Again, we're right back on that theme. Jesus is trying to sort of gently bring them back to that. We know when he gets to the Garden of Gethsemane, what is it? Let this cup pass from me. In my notes here, I've got a whole string of texts describing the cup as a as a metaphor for suffering. Despite what he had taught them, despite what he had been living in front of them, they didn't recognize that lowliness, sacrifice, rejection of the world, and suffering is exactly what followers of Jesus should expect. Man, I'm trying to drive something home here, and I'm trying to do it patiently as Jesus is doing, without being too dismal. But in the world that we're living in now, especially, let's not go out of here with some idea of roses-strewn pathways or life of ease. It's getting harder and harder, and if you're going to follow Jesus, are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? We are going to finish, Paul says, the sufferings of Christ. We are going, if you're not expecting that, if you're not ready for that, then you're just as clueless as these two disciples. This is where preaching can get into an exaggeration, and I don't think I can exaggerate this. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? It's a heart-searching question. Think about this. Think about the suffering. Think about what I just told you. Think about the cross. Think. It's pretty clear, however, they weren't thinking. Look at their overconfident reply. This is cringeworthy stuff, right? We are able. Again, Jesus, what's he going to respond to that? No, you're not. No, you're not. The very fact that you've asked me this question indicates that you're not. You're just, I need more time. These guys are not here yet. We are able. Again, I think it was probably with mixed emotions that Jesus continued. Well, what can we say? It's sort of like when I have to write, recommendations to churches for pastors or candidates. What am I going to say about this guy? He's eager. They're eager, right? They got a lot of potential. It's always a clue. They aspire to great things. They certainly do. That's pretty evident. They're loyal. They're faithful in their own way. At least they still believe in the Messiah. That's what they're looking for. So I suppose Jesus was probably appreciative for their eagerness and their aspiration here, but he's probably also just shaking his head a little bit because he knows that eagerness and aspiration is going to be drained away. And overconfidence is going to be purged, and it's going to be purged real soon at Gethsemane and right after. And the cup, well, again, he's letting them down easy. Verse 23, he said to them, "My cup you shall drink." Again, they thought one thing. Yeah, we're able. You're going to drink it. He knows that's got a different meaning than what they had. They will drink it. And the two sons of Zebedee did drink it, right? We know that James was the first martyr, Acts chapter 12. And John, he's going to live a long life. I wonder when James and John got to heaven, which one thought they had the harder testimony, the harder life to live. Well, James, you were martyred right away. Yeah, but I was martyred. Yeah, but I had to keep on living. Right? Which one do you want? They did live. They did drink the cup, rather, that he drank, but they did so without the self-assured eagerness. They did so without the self-confidence. I'm sure that even they look back on this incident and remembered their own glib answer, "We are able," and shook their heads. Not "we are able." You're able. You're able to help me with it. You're able to do it with me. I know that's what they would say. But then comes some real disappointment. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give. Jesus is not the one that hands out the winning favors like a winning politician. And then just to really dash their hopes, all right, he laid a little Calvinism on them. But it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father, okay? Just to let you know, numbers 1 and 2 are already taken. It's predestined. God is sovereign even over the seating arrangements in the kingdom. Now, at this point, James and John have been mildly rebuked. I'm sure that there's plenty for them to think about. But it appears that the disciples got wind of this request. Look at verse 24. And on hearing this, the 10 became indignant with the two brothers. Indignant. They were indignant. One author says they were most likely indignant because they didn't get their bid in before the two others did. You know, they were probably jealous. I love this. As a commentator, writing a major commentary, puts down, commenting on verse 24, they were probably jealous. That's why I don't get big contracts for writing commentaries. I can't come up with those deep insights. Yeah, they were jealous. Yes, I see it. Leon Morris says the two were stealing a march. I like that. That's a British expression. They were stealing a march on the others. That means getting the jump on the others. Some of whom were doubtless eyeing the same positions. So, once again, Jesus, very patient, verse 25, calls them to himself, and he has some words, some lessons on the subject of ambition. So we're going to finish with looking at these 3 lessons. I give you too much. Let me back up a second. I'll give you the illustration that I thought of, and this is too much. But I remember when I was in your position, where many of you are, I was finishing up in seminary, and I was looking around. There was a fellow in my class, the last class I took in Greek exegesis. And at the end of that class, he leaned over to me and handed me his Greek New Testament and said, I'm not going to need this anymore. And, I didn't know what to do. Should I take it? I mean, hey, it's a book, okay? I took it, okay? And it was pretty well marked up, but I thought. And then I found out that same guy, who, by the way, in the preaching contest that we always had, bombed out in round 1, right? Got a sweet position out here in California, a church of about 1,200 people, and they had already called him as their pastor before he had even graduated. This guy couldn't preach his way out of a wet paper bag, okay? And I know he wasn't going to be using his Greek New Testament. I was indignant. Why in the world? Why that? The Lord came to me and said, I've got something for you. Not verbally, of course. The Lord did provide. It wasn't long after that the Home Missions Board came to me and said, hey, we have a church. We think you'd fit really well. I'm good. Yeah. It's about 20 miles down the road here, close. They meet in a mobile home. They can't pay you anything. We think you'd fit real well. I was indignant. I could keep going on. I had plenty to be indignant about. Again, that may tell you a great deal more than you needed to know, but nevertheless. So, Jesus comes again, he doesn't rebuke them. You're indignant. No, nothing like that. Check your attitude at the door. No, nothing like that. He calls them, and he gives them these lessons. He said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. One author says, world rulers do not provide a model for Jesus' community. By the way, that was before the last election. So, I mean, if you had anybody in mind, okay, just put that out of your mind. World rulers do not provide a model for Jesus' community. They enjoy the pomp and circumstance and flaunt their power and status. Fallen human cultures define greatness in terms of prestige, power, and status. Listen, if I can paraphrase or rephrase a line from Charles Dickens, it's found in A Christmas Carol, but I'm rephrasing it. There is nothing the world so loudly claims to despise and yet lavish praise upon than arrogance, and nothing it so loudly claims to respect but so mercilessly crushes as humility. The world says we don't want arrogant people, and they keep electing arrogant people. They say they want humility, but if you demonstrate humility in front of the world, you will be crushed. Well, that's exactly the point, is it not? In political life, the world over and centuries through, humility is seen as a handicap in politics, not a virtue. Jesus is drawing attention to a well-known fact. Again, look what he says. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles operate this way. He's not commending it, men, of course. He's not suggesting that that's the pattern to follow. He's saying, you know how this works. Tyranny happens because men make it happen, because they think they're going to sit in the seat of the tyrant. You've heard this from Lord Acton. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Or my favorite is from economist Friedrich Hayek. The worst always rise to the top. The expression lorded over is nearly onomatopoetic. Kata kiru usen. Kata kiru usen. Exercise authority. It's a long word. Kata exousiasusen. Peter used the same word in his instructions to pastors, 1 Peter 5. Elders are not to be lording it over allotted to their charge. Another author says it's impossible for the principles of the world to be effective or adaptive to the kingdom. By their very nature, they are contrary to his way and destructive to his work. And that accounts for all the different ways of the world. The church is not the United States government. Okay? Just a little insight. One of the things that I discovered, the different churches that I pastored, was looking over the church constitution. I know you're probably stuck with it, so just live with it. I tried to deal with that one time, and I said, we don't really need the Constitution. I got a certified letter in the mail that week with a copy of the Constitution in it from one of the board members. Get that? Just in case you haven't read this. Next Sunday morning, I handed him a Bible. Just in case you haven't read this. Constitution. Think about little civics very quickly. Little civics. What is the Constitution? The Constitution is there's 3 branches of government. Okay, so you got the judicial, the executive, and you got the legislative. And the design of the American Constitution is they're meant to be at odds with each other. This is the point. The Founding Fathers expected the branches of government to be at odds with each other. Gridlock, right? That's what they wanted. Gridlock and then leave us alone out here, okay? So so you have people fighting each other. You import that model into the church, what do you got? You got the same thing. Who is the executive? Well, that would be the pastor, right? And who's the legislative? Well, that would be the congregation. And who's the judicial? Of course, the judicial can outlaw anything. So who's the judicial in the church? Ladies auxiliary. They can cancel anything, right? You don't have a situation, you don't bring that into the church. It doesn't work. And true to what Hayek said, it just seems the worst always rise to the top in those kinds of situations. It's not that way among you. Ambition is the way of the world, but verses 26 and 27, ambition is not the way of the disciples. It is not this way among you. That should actually be translated, shall not be among you. It's actually a future tense. And by that, by the way, Jesus is affirming that the kingdom is coming. So he's not saying, look, boys, the kingdom is within you, and we're going to spiritualize things from now on. No, it's here, it's coming. But always, the second one is, it shall not be. It's what one syntacticist said, future tense with the force of prohibition. Not like the rulers and the great men of the world. It's coming, but it's not going to be like theirs. This is why, again, the church is an absolutely unique institution on the face of the planet. There's nothing like it. And it operates on principles that are completely different than the way the world works. Whoever wishes, the term there twice, whoever wishes, doesn't mean a wish. It means will so or want so or intend so or plans to do so. Whoever plans, here it comes, to be great or first, should think twice. It's not going to happen the way you think it's going to happen. Among you, things are going to be different. A different aspiration, a different way of serving and doing business. Jesus is the example of that. Jesus is saying, I'm going to go. Follow my example. Look what I'm going to do. You're going to get what I'm going to get, but you're supposed to do it for the reason I'm doing it. Here's you want to be great? Two principles, he says. The first is, if you're going to be great, you have to become servants. The term servant, diakonos, you know what that means? Deacon means to serve, means to minister. Look, I've cleaned more bathrooms than I want to remember. I remember one time we went on a church camp and I was getting ready. My turn to clean the latrines came up. And one of the ladies in the church just objected. She, no. The pastor can't be a part of the latrine cleaning crew. He's the pastor. I love that lady. But But my elders were smarter than me, or they reacted before I could, and they said, I know this is a little earthy, he uses them, he helps clean them. Yeah. Look, I'm there to do whatever it takes in order for the work to go ahead, and sometimes, I know there's deacons, I know we have this very, very clear theology of the church and all of those kind of things. But whoever wishes to be great really has to be a servant. I know, we got the whole Acts thing. We're not that. And you shouldn't be careful, you shouldn't let those mundane things take away from making sure that you preach the word and devote yourself to prayer. It only took 5 minutes to clean the latrine. And I probably spent more time cleaning the latrine than I did in prayer for my people that day. You got to be a servant. You have to be a slave. The term there is doulos. Somebody wrote a book about that, I think, titled Slave. Have you read it? Recently? Soon. Just another slave. Jesus could scarcely have used a more graphic term to bring out the lowliness that his people must seek. Leon Morris writes, it is lowly service that a Christian must find its true fulfillment. They follow the master who took the form of a servant, lived all of his earthly days in humble obscurity. The way forward for them is humility and lowliness. To set one's heart on eminence is to lose the heart of Christ. It means those who take the lead are to be humble, seeking not personal success, but opportunity of doing lowly service. There's an expression, if you're in my classes or hear me preach, that I come back to again and again. I mentioned this Sunday morning in Grace Life. The Lord's reward for a job well done is more work. Your greatest aspiration shouldn't be a place of prominence and preeminence. Your greatest aspiration should be, give me the work. Give me the work. What's the work that needs to be done? Give me the work. I'm going to tell you again, more than you should know. That's been my motto here since I've been here at TMS. Give me the work. Give me the work. More work. When they take work away from me, I feel bad. The other principle is the last shall be first. Verse 27, whoever wishes to be first shall be your slave. Last shall be first. And we've already seen it, the very last verse there, verse 28. Ambition is not the way of the example of Jesus. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. The notion behind ransom there has generated some strange ideas. Origen's ransom to Satan theory. It's truly bizarre. I might as well say this too. No offense to the historical theologian here, but I don't think we're going to see Origen in heaven. I mean, this guy's just way too wacky, okay? He came up with the ransom to Satan theory. Really? Okay, where did you get this? Well, it comes from the idea that, people who were taken captive in battle had to be ransomed out and that sort of thing. And so if you're paying a ransom, this is his logic, if you're paying a ransom, then whoever you're paying the ransom to owes it. Satan's not getting a ransom. What are you talking about? This is nonsense. Ransom to Satan. The idea of ransom is something that comes from the Old Testament, not from Greek usage. Exodus chapter 30, verse 12, Psalm 49, verses 7 through 9, Isaiah 53. The point here is this ransom is a substitution. Get this. This ransom is undoubtedly implying substitution, says Morris, another author. We may take the phrase lutron ante palu as ransom in the place of many. Matthew wants us to know that Jesus teaches vicarious substitution. Jesus teaches that. Just to toss in another little controversy, he also teaches particular redemption because he came to ransom the many. Many can't mean everybody. Look at Isaiah chapter 53, verses 11 and 12. Many. But the point made here for these disciples is the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. It's direct contradiction to the attitude that they were showing. They want to get on the top, and Jesus said, I just came from the top. Jesus shows them not the way to get up, but to get down, to come down. And he came down, and he kept coming down. And he came all the way down until he was raised up on a cross. And that's what you need to aspire to. It's a trite phrase. Most trite phrases really have some deep truth to them. First a cross, then a crown. Again, from our vantage point, we look over this whole scene and we go, what were they thinking? How could you possibly make that kind of a request? Well, again, I've said, they didn't really know, they didn't really understand it until after the cross and after the resurrection. And then they understood. But we're on the other side of the cross already. So the question is really to us, what are we thinking? Heavenly Father, thank you again for the examples that you give us, even if they are wayward ones, that we may learn from them. Ours is the way of the cross. Ours is to follow Jesus. Not just to follow him in the train of his glory, which we will. But before that, to follow him as a servant, as a slave, as one willing to lay down his life, to serve. Opportunities for service are your reward to us. May we look for those opportunities and not despise a single one of them, because they come from you and they're for your glory. Finish the message in our hearts and minds in Jesus' name. Amen.